Is free agent wide receiver Mike Evans too expensive for the Houston Texans? And if he's not, how much is it going to cost? Let's break it down. Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. Let's talk about a fun and exciting potential free agent target for the Texans. Wide receiver Mike Evans from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you don't know about Mike Evans, you haven't watched football over the past decade or so. He is the most consistent wide receiver in football. He is good for 1,000 yards every season. He's done it every season he's been in the NFL. From the Jameis Winstons to the Tom Brady's to the Baker Mayfields as his quarterback, Mike Evans is Mr. Consistency, and he's set to be a free agent. The Texans could use a little bit of added offensive firepower. Fitting Mike Evans in with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, that'd make the Texans one of the best offenses in all of football. But it's free agency. It's a big-time wide receiver like Mike Evans. It could be expensive. The Houston Chronicle reported, after talking to a league source, Evans could be asking for $25 to $30 million per year. $25 to $30 million per year for a wide receiver who turns 31 for this upcoming season. Now, that is pretty expensive and pretty pricey. I think it's important to find out why Evans is so expensive, and can the Texans afford him, and should they make that investment if they get that opportunity? Let's talk about why Evans is so expensive. Well, first of all, is I talked about it, the consistency. Mike Evans is Mr. Consistency. He goes out there and gets you 1,000 yards every season, and sometimes it's even more. Heck, just this past year, in addition to the 1,000-plus yards, he got 13 touchdowns. A typical Mike Evans season, that's right, a typical Mike Evans season, when you average together all the years of his career, Evans averages about 75, 76 catches, almost 1,200 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That's right, 76 or so catches, almost 1,200 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That's his average, and that's over 15 games. That's what he averages over the course of his career. And you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe he slowed down recently. Well, he played all 17 games for the Buccaneers this year. He had 13 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. Again, he doesn't seem to be slowing down. He's kind of an ageless wonder here. Sure, the Tom Brady years, they look even better. It just happens to be that when you play a better quarterback with Mike Evans, you get better results out of Mike Evans. Imagine putting Mike Evans with C.J. Stroud in the upcoming season. The results could be incredible. So Mr. Consistency and the talent, that's a part of the reason Evans is asking for $25 to $30 million a year. The other part is, take a look at this. This is the free agency class. These are the names that Mike Evans is going up against in free agency. Michael Pittman Jr., Calvin Ridley, Gabriel Davis, Rashid Shaheed is not actually a free agent. He's an early restricted free agent, so the Saints are going to keep him. T. Higgins, okay? And Evans, with the yards, more than all these guys. With the touchdowns, more than all of these guys. Mike Evans is a big-time free agent, and types of guys like Mike Evans don't hit free agency very often. In fact, you think about some of the big-time recent free agent wide receivers, who's the biggest contract you can think of from the past couple of years? Is it Kenny Golladay? Because that's one of the biggest contracts that a free agent wide receiver has signed. Look at who the top paid wide receivers are by average annual value. Tyreek Hill was traded for. Devontae Adams was traded for. Cooper Kupp's on another contract with his team. A.J. Brown traded for. Stephon Diggs traded for. DK Metcalf, he's always been with the Seahawks. Deebo Samuel, he's always been with the 49ers. Terry McLaurin, he's always been with the Commanders. DJ Moore, he was traded for and got a big contract. So $30 million a year, all the way down to, just over $20 million a year. Most of these guys were traded for or were with their teams that they have always been with when they signed these big contracts. So Evans asking for $25 million, almost $30 million as a free agent, when there's a bidding war for his services, it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about that average annual value asked for Mike Evans. $30 million is Tyreek Hill. Mike Evans is not Tyreek Hill. Mike Evans is not going to be the same age as Tyreek Hill and when Hill signed that contract. And he's just not as dynamic. He's really good and he's consistent, but I'd gladly pay Tyreek Hill $30 million a year. I don't know if I'm paying Mike Evans $30 million a year. You get down to Devontae Adams, $28 a year. I mean, he's roughly the same age, give or take a year, that he signed when he signed the contract that Mike Evans would be signing that contract. That's 5 years, $140 million for that $28 million average annual a year value for Devontae Adams. It's getting up there. Let's find the bottom. I mean, you look at some of these wide receivers. Stephon Diggs is super inconsistent. DK Metcalf's very good. Deebo Samuel has not been exactly worth the big-time money, hasn't replicated that amazing season that he negotiated off of. I mean, this is kind of feels like the floor, $24 or so million a year for Mike Evans. And I know SpotRack, which is the site that I'm on right now, projects him to be about $24 million a year. So you can parse the conversation about, well, he's a little bit older. I would tell you that Mike Evans is going to eliminate that conversation pretty quickly because guys like him don't hit free agency. And because guys like him don't hit free agency, they can ask for more in free agency. So when you get to that $25 to $30 million a year, can the Texans get Mike Evans at that number and still accomplish what they want to put together in the 2024 season and beyond? Well, the biggest thing for the Texans is they don't have an expensive quarterback. CJ Stroud still on the rookie contract, and even when he gets the big contract in a few years, it's still a little bit of time before that really kicks in. So you've got the time to really push your chips into the middle of the table if you're Nick Caserio and the Texans as far as investing money into this team. So if you want to go get Mike Evans, you've got the money to do it. The Texans have one of the top available cap numbers in all of football. Now, the Buccaneers are a top 10 number as well, and they will likely look to keep Mike Evans, but Baker Mayfield is a guy that they want to bring back. Mayfield could be expensive. Evans might just simply be looking for a change of scenery as well. Tampa wasn't bad last year, but he could go to a team that's a little bit better than Tampa, get the big payday, and find himself playing even more competitive football than he has in the past couple of years, and he could be doing that with a big salary under his belt as well. So do the Texans chase Mike Evans? That's what everybody really wants to know. I would have the conversation with him and try to figure out what my offseason would look like if I made that big investment. Again, the Texans have the money to do this with Mike Evans. The salary cap's going to keep going up in the next couple of years. And sure, you've got Nico Collins to pay either this offseason or next offseason, and he could command big-time money when he goes to the negotiating table with the Texans. But you've got the room on this team if you want to make the investment in Mike Evans. It solidifies your top three wide receivers, Evans, Collins, and Tank Dell. It's worth noting Evans is kind of an Iron Man. He plays about 15 games a season. Nico Collins stayed healthy for the first time ever in his career this year. He still missed a game. And then Tank Dell got hurt. That was kind of a freak accident versus Tank Dell's got issues with injuries. But you'd have a pretty solid record of guys playing on the team and not having injuries drastically affect the investment that you've made in them. It would, however, greatly hinder your ability to go chase some other positions. Look, Mike Evans is not a need for the Texans. They need some more help on offense, but they may not necessarily need a player to Mike Evans's level. He comes off as a luxury to something that they kind of need for this team. You know, they have two starting wide receivers and some options behind Mike Evans. They don't currently have a starting defensive end opposite Will Anderson, and that's where Jonathan Grenard in the conversation for him at defensive end comes in. They don't currently have a starting cornerback opposite Derek Stingley because Steven Nelson is a free agent. They don't currently have a starting tight end because Dalton Schultz is a free agent. An investment in Mike Evans certainly pushes Jonathan Grenard and Dalton Schultz out the door. Grenard will be highly sought after in free agency. So will Dalton Schultz. He's the top free agent tight end on the market. It certainly pushes those two players out the door, and it makes an investment in the cornerback spot, either bringing Steven Nelson back or signing a free agent at cornerback who's worth the money, or at least close to worth the money. It makes it very tenuous when you try to figure that out exactly. So I would like to see Mike Evans on the Texans. It feels like the time to have gotten Mike Evans on the Texans was maybe a year ago when you could have traded for him if you wanted to. That's if the Buccaneers were indeed selling. They might have thought they had something going. It feels like the money would take too much away from other spots on the team. If he is indeed commanding that, say, $27.5 million for 3 or 4 seasons. That's another aspect of it. The commitment length to this contract, Evans, I would think, is going to want some sort of security built in to this contract. 4, maybe 5 years where he finishes up the high point of his, the top part of the mountain of his playing career. 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years on this contract. There's got to be some sort of commitment to Mike Evans in the contract negotiations, in addition to the big time money. I don't believe it fits for the Texans. I just feel like they could spread that money around to a couple of other spots, add some mid-level talent at wide receiver. There's not a lot of high-level guys, but there could be some mid-level bounce-back guys that the Texans could add at wide receiver. They could also draft some wide receivers. I was at the Senior Bowl this past week. There's a couple of guys that would make sense. Check out the Senior Bowl videos here on the channel in the second or maybe third round to fix some of the depth on that wide receiver room for the Texans. So the big investment in Mike Evans, I don't know that I would do it. It feels like it takes away too much from some of the other spots that the Texans have to fill. And maybe when we fill in these spots, if some of the previous drafts didn't have so many misses and then weren't so short on the amount of draft picks, when you have a draft pick deficit that you're working from, you sort of have to end up backfilling it with free agency money and other draft picks because you don't have guys paying off down the road for this team. The Texans, of course, didn't have all their picks in the final years of the Bill O'Brien era and then in the start of the Nick Caserio era as well. So I would not do the Mike Evans investment. Not that he's too expensive. Look, if you want to go with Mike Evans and fill in the defensive end and tight end and cornerback spots elsewhere, the Texans have the money to do it. I think that's the biggest thing you need to understand. If they want Mike Evans, they can get Mike Evans. But I believe they could more prudently spend their money elsewhere and still add to the wide receiver room and help C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell continue to take that passing game to even higher heights than what we have seen. Would you sign Mike Evans? Would you add the big-time wide receiver in free agency? Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're headed down to the comment section, check out BetUS, our official sportsbook partner here on the channel. Use the link in the description down below. Deposit at least $50 and get gambling today. Just a little college basketball action this past weekend. For me, St. Mary's Gonzaga was a fun one. And, of course, the end of football season is upon us. Get your bets in. So many different things to bet on a week from now when football season's finishing up with the big game. You can bet on anything and everything in that and do it with our friends at BetUS. BetUS, America's top sports book for 30 years. That's right, 30 years for BetUS. The link in the description down below is where you need to sign up. Deposit at least $50 and get going. Please game responsibly when you do. All right, appreciate you watching the video. So many more free agency videos. Can they? Should they? Will they? Do they have the money to do this? And if you have questions about free agency, throw them in the comment section as well. Do my best to answer them. Don't forget to check out Houston football. We'll do a lot of coverage, contract breakdowns, and things like that on Houston football. I do all my writing as well. www.houfootball.com. Link in the description down below. Throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Appreciate you watching the video. Can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.